A massive wildfire began spreading through the Florida Everglades. It's triggering evacuations and sending thick smoke across parts of South Florida. What made the situation so disturbing was the fact that the Everglades is one of the wettest ecosystems in North America. This is a place known for floods, alligators, endless wetlands, and standing water stretching for miles. It is not supposed to burn, and yet within hours, thousands of acres had already turned into blackened ash as helicopters flew overhead dropping water on flames moving through dried-out marshland. Its roads near Miami were forced to shut down, neighborhoods filled with smoke, and many residents began realizing this was not a normal wildfire season anymore. Something in Florida had started changing, and the warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore. For decades, the Florida Everglades was seen as one of the last places in America that could ever face a wildfire disaster like this. Covering nearly 1.5 million acres, the Everglades is famous for its endless wetlands, thick sawgrass marshes, mangrove forests, and slow-moving water stretching across South Florida. This ecosystem is home to alligators, crocodiles, rare birds, and some of the most fragile wildlife habitats in North America. People feared hurricanes here. They feared flooding. But fire was never supposed to be part of the conversation. That is what makes this event feel so unnatural. Residents living near the western edges of Miami watch dark smoke rise from land that is normally underwater for much of the year. Helicopters circled above the wetlands while flames moved across dry grass that should have been soaked with water. The image shocked many people across Florida because it looked less like a flooded swamp and more like a drought-stricken grassland. And for many longtime residents, that was the moment they realized something inside the Everglades had fundamentally changed. The wildfire, later identified as the Max Road Fire, began spreading near western Broward County and escalated with terrifying speed. Within just a few hours, hundreds of acres were already burning across the dry Everglades landscape. By the following morning, the fire had exploded past 4,000 acres, and before many residents could fully process what was happening, the burn zone had doubled again. Thick gray smoke started drifting across South Florida, becoming visible from parts of Miami and nearby highways. Drivers traveling along Highway 27 slowed down to film the massive smoke clouds rising above the wetlands, creating dangerous traffic backups as emergency crews rushed toward the fire lines. News helicopters captured dramatic footage of flames tearing through dry sawgrass, while water-dropping aircraft circled overhead. For many residents, the speed of the fire was the most alarming part. This was not a slow-moving brush fire hidden deep in remote wilderness. It was a rapidly growing wildfire, moving through an ecosystem that most people believed was naturally protected by water. And that illusion was collapsing in real time. Before the next disaster unfolds, make sure to subscribe, stay informed, and follow every major Weather Today update with us. What allowed this fire to become so dangerous was not just the wind or the heat. It was the condition of the Everglades itself. For months, large parts of Florida had been trapped under severe drought conditions, with rainfall far below normal levels. The wetlands that usually remained soaked for most of the year had slowly started drying out under constant heat and lack of moisture. Water levels across sections of the Everglades dropped low enough to expose thick layers of sawgrass, peat, and organic soil that normally stay underwater. Once those natural protections disappeared, the landscape began transforming into fuel. This is what shocked many environmental experts. The Everglades is designed to function like a giant natural water system for South Florida, constantly moving and storing water across the region. But prolonged drought and rising temperatures were beginning to break that balance. Instead of acting like a wetland barrier against fire, parts of the ecosystem started behaving more like dry grassland. Fire crews warned that even a small spark from a cigarette, vehicle, equipment, or power line could ignite massive flames under conditions this dry. And with no significant rainfall expected anytime soon, officials feared the situation across Florida could become even more unstable in the weeks ahead. But the most dangerous part of this wildfire was not always visible above the ground. As the Everglades dried out, the fire began burning into the peat beneath the surface. Peat is made from layers of dead organic material that have built up over hundreds, or even thousands of years inside wetlands. Under normal conditions, it stays wet and stable, but once it dries, it becomes extremely flammable. And unlike normal brush fires, peat fires can continue burning underground long after the visible flames disappear. That creates a nightmare situation for firefighters. A fire line may appear contained on the surface, while heat continues moving silently beneath the ground. Days later, flames can suddenly reappear in another location as the underground fire spreads through dry organic soil. Officials warned that some sections of the Everglades could continue smoldering for weeks if conditions remained hot and dry. This is one reason wildfires inside wetlands are so difficult to fully extinguish. Even after smoke begins clearing and helicopters leave the area, the danger often remains hidden underneath the surface. As the wildfire continued expanding across the Everglades, the emergency response quickly escalated into something far larger than a routine brush fire operation. Military helicopters from the Florida National Guard were deployed to make repeated water drops over the burning wetlands, while multiple firefighting agencies coordinated across the region. Ground crews from the Florida Forest Service, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, and local departments established containment lines around vulnerable areas as smoke spread toward nearby communities. From the air, helicopters circled continuously above the fire zone, dumping thousands of gallons of water onto fast-moving flames cutting through dry sawgrass. On the ground, emergency teams monitored changing wind conditions hour by hour, knowing a sudden shift could push the fire dangerously closer to neighborhoods near Pembroke Pines and Weston. Police also had to manage growing traffic problems as drivers stopped along highways to film the massive smoke clouds rising over the Everglades. What made the situation feel especially alarming was how close this wildfire was to one of the largest metropolitan regions in the United States. This was no remote forest fire hidden deep in wilderness. It was unfolding just outside Miami. For residents living near the western edge of South Florida, the wildfire quickly became more than just a headline on television. Entire neighborhoods began waking up to the smell of smoke drifting through the air. In communities near Pembroke Pines, Weston and Holly Lake, people stepped outside to find ash covering cars, patios, and streets. Some residents described the atmosphere as surreal, watching helicopters fly overhead while thick smoke slowly darkened the sky in the distance. Families started preparing for the possibility that the fire could move closer if the winds changed direction. Garden hoses were left running across lawns and around homes as people tried to wet down dry areas near their properties. Others packed emergency bags and monitored evacuation updates throughout the day. Inside many neighborhoods, conversations shifted from normal daily routines to questions about containment lines, wind forecasts, and road closures. Parents kept children indoors as air quality worsened across parts of the region. What frightened many residents most was how unfamiliar the situation felt. Hurricanes are part of life in Florida, but watching a massive wildfire spread through the Everglades near major suburban communities felt like something entirely different and deeply unsettling. While crews were still struggling to contain the Max Road fire, another wildfire suddenly ignited farther south in Miami-Dade County. The new blaze, later called the 77th Avenue Fire, spread rapidly near Florida City and burned hundreds of acres within a short period of time. Authorities were forced to close parts of Card Sound Road as firefighters rushed to stop the flames from expanding deeper into dry vegetation. The appearance of a second wildfire immediately changed the mood across South Florida. This was no longer being treated as one isolated emergency. Two separate fires were now burning inside the same drought-stricken region at the same time, both fueled by extreme dryness and dangerous weather conditions. Fire officials warned that nearly any spark could trigger additional outbreaks if the drought continued. For many residents, the second fire became a clear sign that the situation was becoming harder to control. What started as a single wildfire in the Everglades was beginning to look more like the early stages of a much larger wildfire crisis across Florida. As firefighters slowly gained ground against the flames, a larger and more troubling reality was beginning to emerge. Officials across Florida warned that the Max Road fire was not simply a rare accident caused by bad luck. It was part of a growing pattern that has been developing across the state for years. According to fire authorities, Florida had already recorded nearly 2,000 wildfires in 2026 alone, even though the state was still only entering the early part of wildfire season. That number alarmed many experts because Florida is traditionally associated with hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding, not large-scale wildfire disasters, but prolonged drought, rising temperatures, and increasingly dry vegetation have started changing the landscape in ways many residents never expected. Fire officials openly warned that more wildfires were likely in the coming weeks, and some could potentially move even closer to heavily populated areas. The deeper concern is that events like this may no longer be unusual. The Everglades fire exposed how vulnerable South Florida becomes when water levels drop too low for too long. What was once considered an ecosystem naturally resistant to fire is now capable of producing dangerous, fast-moving wildfires under the right conditions. And for many people watching these events unfold, the question is no longer whether another major wildfire will happen, but how soon it will happen again. What makes the situation in the Everglades especially serious is that this ecosystem is far more than just a swamp in southern Florida. The Everglades functions as one of the most important natural systems in the United States, supporting wildlife, tourism, agriculture, and even the drinking water supply for millions of people. Nearly 9 million residents across South Florida depend on water connected to the Everglades system. It also serves as home to dozens of threatened and endangered species, including the Florida panther, American crocodile, wood stork, and West Indian manatee. When wildfires burn through this landscape, the damage goes beyond trees and grass. Fires inside dried wetlands can destroy peat soil that took centuries to develop, reducing the land's ability to store water naturally. That creates long-term risks for both ecosystems and nearby communities. Environmental experts have warned for years that drought, urban expansion, canal systems, and climate pressure were slowly weakening the Everglades. Now many fear these wildfires may be exposing just how unstable the system has become. The economic consequences could also become severe. Tourism connected to Florida's wetlands generates billions of dollars every year, while nearby agriculture relies heavily on stable regional water conditions. If the Everglades continues drying out, the effects may eventually spread far beyond the fire zones themselves. Even as containment numbers improved and smoke slowly began clearing across parts of South Florida, many fire officials warned that the danger was far from over. The most unsettling reality is that this wildfire happened in May, long before the peak of Florida's traditional wildfire season. Normally, the most dangerous conditions arrive later in summer after extended heat and drought continue drying vegetation across the state. But this year, extreme dryness arrived unusually early. That has raised serious concerns about what could happen over the next several months if meaningful rainfall does not return soon. Underground peat fires may continue smoldering beneath the Everglades even after visible flames disappear, creating the risk of new flare-ups later on. At the same time, weather forecasts were still showing hot temperatures and limited rain across parts of South Florida. Fire crews openly admitted they expect more wildfires in the near future. And if another large fire starts closer to heavily populated areas, the consequences could become far more dangerous than what Florida experienced this week. For now, the skies above parts of South Florida are beginning to clear again. Some evacuation warnings have eased, roads are reopening, and helicopters are slowly returning to base. But deep inside the Everglades, sections of dry peat may still be burning beneath the surface, hidden from view and waiting for the next shift in wind or heat. What happened this week was not just another wildfire headline. For many people, it felt like a warning about how quickly familiar environments can change under extreme conditions. The Everglades was once considered naturally protected from disasters like this. Now that assumption is starting to disappear, and with drought conditions continuing across Florida, officials fear this may only be the beginning of a much larger wildfire threat in the years ahead. Do you think Florida is entering a new era of dangerous wildfire seasons? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more Weather Today updates, extreme climate events, and breaking disaster coverage from around the world.